in the shadows of Jerusalem. It was a cold winter morning. The streets of Jerusalem woke up under a misty and quiet sky. Along the sidewalks, huddled in torn blankets and old boxes, were people waiting silently to start another day. Among them, tucked into a corner, wearing a torn coat and hidden beneath layers of time and sorrow, sat a man, David Ovram. David was in his early 50s, with grey-threaded beard, cracked hands, and tired, defeated eyes. He once had a life, a meaningful one. He had been a teacher, a father, and a husband. But life had not been kind. First, he lost his young son in a car accident. Then, his wife was taken by cancer. What followed was grief, depression, and a slow descent into nothingness. He lost his job, his home, and eventually, his identity. Now he walked the streets of Jerusalem as a ghost, invisible, forgotten. 2. The unexpected encounter. On an ordinary morning near Jerusalem's Mahan Yehuda market, David was digging through a trash can, searching for something to eat. Suddenly, he felt a firm hand on his shoulder. Startled, he turned. In front of him stood a man in a dark coat, neatly dressed, eyes filled with both curiosity and concern. It was none other than Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. David blinked, unsure whether he was imagining things. Was this really who he thought it was? "Hello," said the man. "What's your name?" David hesitated. His throat was dry and he hadn't spoken to anyone in days. Finally, he whispered, "David." "David Ovram." Netanyahu studied his face. In David's eyes, he saw more than homelessness. He saw deep pain, abandonment, and a lifetime of unspoken stories. He turned discreetly to one of his aides and whispered, "Find out who this man is. Stay close. He needs help." 3. A man with a past. Netanyahu's team followed up immediately. They discovered that David had been a well-respected teacher in Tel Aviv. He was once described by his students as compassionate, brilliant, and inspiring. His fall into homelessness wasn't due to addiction or laziness, it was grief. Pure and consuming. The loss of his family had crushed his will to live. When Netanyahu read David's background report, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. "Set up a meeting. I want to speak with him again, properly." A few days later, Netanyahu returned to the market. This time, he came alone, carrying a thermos of hot tea and 2 paper cups. He found David sitting in the same spot. "Would you share some tea with me?" he asked. Surprised, David hesitated, then slowly nodded. They sat together on a bench. And for the first time in many years, David talked. He talked about his wife, his son, his classroom, and how everything slipped away. Netanyahu listened. Truly listened. That conversation lasted almost an hour. 4. First step toward change. The next day, David was moved into a temporary shelter arranged by Netanyahu's office. It wasn't luxurious, but it was warm. He had a bed, a hot shower, and 3 meals a day. That night, lying in bed, David cried himself to sleep, not from pain, but from the shock of feeling human again. Netanyahu wasn't finished. He doesn't just need shelter. He needs purpose, he told his staff. He arranged for David to receive counseling, health checks, and a complete wardrobe. Slowly but surely, David began to transform. He shaved. He wore clean clothes. He began to smile. But most importantly, he started to hope. Rediscovering the teacher within. With further encouragement, David was enrolled in a government-sponsored retraining program. The goal, to update his teaching skills for the digital age. He attended classes 4 times a week. He sat with younger people, learned about computers, online tools, and modern teaching methods. One day, a course supervisor called Netanyahu. "This man was born to teach," she said. "He's helping other trainees. He's inspiring them." Netanyahu smiled. "Then let's bring him back to the classroom." 6. A story that touched the nation. Word of David's transformation began to spread. First, local newspapers wrote about him. Then national TV stations came calling. Everyone wanted to hear the story of the homeless teacher saved by the Prime Minister. But David didn't seek the spotlight. He gave only one interview. On live television, he said, "For years, no one saw me. They looked away. But he looked into my eyes. And he saw me." His words brought millions to tears. 7. The classroom reborn. David returned to teaching not in a traditional school, but at an adult education center in Jerusalem. His students were adults who had struggled with life, ex-convicts, former addicts, and yes, even homeless men and women. He wasn't just a teacher now. He was a symbol of what was possible. He named his first class Restart. Every morning, he stood before his students and began the day with the same phrase: "It's not too late. Not for any of you." Netanyahu visited the center one day. On the board, David had written, "Your past shapes you, but your future builds you." The Prime Minister took a photo and shared it on social media with the caption, "This is why we lead, to help people rebuild." 8. The award. 1 year after their first meeting, David received the Teacher of the Year award from the Jerusalem municipality. The event was packed. Netanyahu attended in person and asked to say a few words. He said, "David reminded me what leadership truly means. Not power. Not politics. But helping one soul rediscover his light." When David took the stage, he looked at Netanyahu, then at the audience. "I was buried, forgotten, and broken. But someone believed in me. That belief brought me back to life." They hugged. Cameras flashed. The photo was everywhere the next day, on posters, magazines, and the front pages of newspapers. 9. Giving back. Inspired by his journey, David launched a non-profit foundation, New Beginnings. Its mission was simple: provide shelter, skills, and hope to Jerusalem's homeless. With Netanyahu's help, the foundation quickly grew. Celebrities donated. Schools partnered with it. Volunteers joined from all over the country. In just 3 years, over 2,000 people had found help through New Beginnings. Many had found jobs. Some had returned to school. Others simply found peace. David spent most of his time visiting shelters, giving speeches, and encouraging those who still slept on the streets. "I was you," he would say. "And if I could stand again, so can you." The final bench. 5 years passed. One morning, David received a call. It was from the Prime Minister's office. A car picked him up. No media, no announcement. Just a private meeting. He was taken to Mahan Yehuda, the very same spot where it all began. There, on the same bench, Netanyahu was waiting. They sat together, in silence at first. David looked around. The streets looked brighter. The air cleaner. He turned and asked, "Why did you stop that day? Why me?" Netanyahu smiled and said, "Because you weren't just homeless. You were lost. A star fallen from the sky. You only needed someone to see your light again." They sat for another hour. No cameras. No applause. Just two men, forever connected by a shared moment that changed both their lives. And in that stillness, under the same Jerusalem sun, a truth glowed brighter than ever. Everyone deserves a second chance.